When any film becomes iconic, it's inevitable that the studio will remake it, hoping, but probably failing, to recreate that same success. And because cinemagoers are drawn to the familiar, it does make sense why people would flock to see another rendition of a recognized and beloved property. And sometimes this practice does work out for the best, but more often than not it does go south and we end up with these sorry messes. I'm Josh from What Culture Horror, and these are 10 horror movie remakes that you must never watch. Number 10, Poltergeist. The Poltergeist remake is so forgettable that you probably even forgot that it existed until right now. I know I did. Even if you saw it, it doesn't leave any impression at all because it cannot hold a candle to Tobe Hooper's classic. I saw it in cinemas when it came out and I genuinely couldn't recall a single frame of it to you now. And you know what's weird? You can actually tell that this film isn't going to work based entirely on the poster, which depicts a clown doll. This image is a nod, of course, to the scene in the original Poltergeist where Robbie is strangled by a possessed doll. But because the remake uses the creepy doll to sell its movie, it's basically telling us that it's going to copy the best bits of its forerunner rather than try to do anything new. All the key scenes are recreated, including the doll, the attacking trees, the static hand, the child being sucked into the TV, and of course the iconic line "They're here." The only difference is that none of these scenes are scary since they're all replicated so poorly. Sam Rockwell and Jared Harris do their best to keep the story grounded, but it's not enough. And they're my dudes as well. I honestly love these two actors, and even they can't save this for me. Due to the unconvincing special effects and superficial scares, the 2015 Poltergeist is just a waste of effort. Number 9, The Fog. In the 1980 version of The Fog, a horde of ghosts appear from an inexplicable mist and attack the citizens of Antonio Island. Because of its straightforward plot, The Fog could have been an unmemorable schlockfest, but with visionary director John Carpenter at the helm, this ghostly thriller is genuinely chilling. A Scooby-Doo episode brought to life, and I mean that as a compliment. The way Carpenter slowly builds tension before delivering a well-earned jump scare makes The Fog feel like a supernatural version of Jaws or something. The small town connected by radio vibe is done exceptionally well as well, and it just has a lot of style going for it. It may not be as masterful as Carpenter's other works like The Thing or Halloween, but The Fog does deserve more credit. Too bad, though, that the same cannot be said about the 2005 remake. Now, to this flick's credit, it does take its time building up to the supernatural elements and doesn't shove in relentless jump scares, which is quite common in modern horrors. Sadly, it never feels suspenseful since all the characters are generic, whiny, and unlikable, and the whole thing is just a little bit drab. If you thought things would pick up when the killing begins as well, the film actually gets somehow worse, so don't even bother for that. Number 8, Day of the Dead. George A. Romero's iconic zombie films have been bastardized by many a remake. Hell, thanks to the original Night of the Living Dead slipping into public domain immediately, there have been enough shoddy remakes that could have taken up this entire list in terms of tanking the quality. Day of the Dead, however, the underrated third installment in Romero's series, has also received its fair share of remakes and adaptations. The 2008 version, simply titled Day of the Dead, is particularly shoddy. One of those in-name-only remakes that clearly has no love for the thing it's based on. Sure, some of the characters share names and roles, but for the most part the story is entirely different and far more cliched. It's clear the whole thing was just a cheap cash in, throwing a bunch of zombie tropes from the mid to late 2000s into a blender and then just kinda hoping for the best. It's an ugly, ugly flick, and not even the great Ving Rhames was enough to save this trash fire. Number 7, The Omen. To help promote the Omen reboot, it was released on the 6th of the 606, as of course a reference to the biblical mark of the beast, which is 666. And that's pretty neat, right? Well, sadly, more effort was put into this marketing ploy than the film itself. 2006's The Omen is a remake in a very literal sense, since it literally just remakes everything that made the original special. If you watch the trailer, you can tell that the director John Moore prioritized making his work identical to the flick's precursor, rather than focusing on making it entertaining. It's so similar beat for beat and line for line that it feels like it was designed by an algorithm. Despite the fact that the sequels were disappointing, they did have some creatively haunting moments, and unfortunately there's none of that here. It's got a great cast and it's shot well, but it lacks in scares since we just know what's going to happen. Once the audience realizes that it's following the formula of Richard Donner's version meticulously, you know the only difference is that these scenes are gonna lack tension and will be plagued with sloppy CGI. Number 6, The Amityille Horror. Remakes are often cast in a bad light since their very nature is a sign of unoriginality. Nevertheless, there are some stories that do deserve a do-over. I mean, if a movie doesn't come together despite having a lot of potential, there's no reason not to try again. A perfect example of this notion is the Amityille Horror. Even though it was a smash hit at the time, this was almost certainly because it was supposedly based on a true story rather than the quality of the film itself. The Amityille Horror received scathing reviews from critics upon its release and isn't regarded much better today. So when Andrew Douglas decided to make his directorial debut by remaking the Amityille Horror, it felt like it was an opportunity to do this story justice. But somehow, it turned out even worse. Due to an over-reliance on shock edits and unsubtle scares, not even Ryan Reynolds' oozing charm could stop this film feeling just run-of-the-mill. The only advantage this version of the Amityille Horror has over its predecessor is that it's nearly 30 minutes shorter. But if a film's best quality is its brevity, that's probably not a good sign, is it? Number 5. Flatliners. Flatliners follows a group of medical students who perform an experiment that stops and restarts their hearts so they can experience the afterlife. But after each of the participants are plagued by haunting visions, they realize that they've opened a doorway to the supernatural that they cannot close. It's a cool premise, right? Well, the 2017 remake felt like it could surpass Joel Schumacher's version since it was directed by the same filmmaker behind The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and the writer of Source Code. Also, it doesn't perform the cardinal sin of duplicating the original film scene by scene, and instead tries to capture its predecessor's unsettling atmosphere. Unfortunately, the key word here is tries, since the latter Flatliners fails to have any real redeemable qualities, especially when it comes to the scares. Its biggest issue is that it cannot decide what genre it is. If you like slow burn horror, you'll enjoy the film's reliance on suspense until it turns into a CGI-riddled jump scare-a-thon. One minute you're watching a tense medical thriller, and the next it turns into a cliched film mess. Number 4. 13 Ghosts. The original 13 Ghosts centers around a family who inherit a mansion haunted by spirits that can only be seen while wearing spectral goggles. The film was nothing special, but it did have a lot of cheesy, dumb fun along the way. But the remake, titled Thir13en Ghosts, if I'm reading that logo correctly, took this dumb plot and somehow made it even dumber. As before, the story follows a family who inherit a vast estate after their relative Cyrus passes away. Shortly after arriving, though, the family discover that their new home is filled with 12 vengeful phantoms. But then, in the climax, spoilers I guess, it's revealed that Cyrus is alive and hiding in the house. He faked his own death, hoping to lure the family to his abode so he could turn one of them into the 13th and final ghost to activate a machine that will allow Cyrus to see through time. This is, quite frankly, an insane movie, and there is something to be said about that. However, while you might get some enjoyment out of catching clips of the best moments on YouTube, or say watching other people's videos on it, you're best probably leaving it at that, because the whole thing ain't worth it. Number 3. Carrie. Many people criticised the Carrie remake at the time, accusing the lead actress, Chloe Grace Moretz, of being too cool to portray a bullied high schooler. However, the film emphasises that Carrie White is ridiculed because of her prudence and overly religious upbringing. So, while Moretz doesn't nail the role the way that Sissy Spacek did in the original, the young actress is still pretty good at playing a misunderstood outsider. Sadly, though, with that misconception aside, the rest of the film totally blows. Although the bullies were generic in the original novel and original film, they are now so unrealistically evil they're more akin to cartoon villains. Any moment in this film that had the potential to be scary is ruined by the overuse of slow motion as well. Hell, the iconic shot of the blood dropping on Carrie is done in slow-mo 3 times, just in case you didn't realize that the scene is important. Unsurprisingly, this remake tries to outdo the original climax by inserting overly elaborate creative deaths and more special effects than anyone could imagine. But not only is this conclusion too stylized and CGI heavy, but the image quality and cinematography as well is just ugly, which is unbearably distracting. Despite the fact that the final shot hints at a sequel, the potential franchise wisely chose to stay buried. Number 2. Martyrs. If you're a fan of what culture horror, or just horror in general I guess, you're probably sick to death of hearing about Martyrs. It's considered one of the scariest horror films of all time, and for good reason. Hollywood being Hollywood though, they got this memo way too late and eventually put in a long overdue remake that just capitalized on nothing. Still, when the co-directors of the Martyrs remake emphasized that their version would be a reimagining rather than a retelling, it did sound like they were wisely trying to not just imitate the original, but do something kind kind of fresh. But upon watching the supposed reimagining, it's obvious that the filmmakers missed the point of the original entirely. All the complex, nihilistic themes that made the original Martyrs so disturbing are entirely absent here, weirdly. Instead, they're replaced with incessant gore, which, admittedly, the original did have in spades as well, but that actually had a point and it was effective, whereas here, it's just gore for the sake of gore. There's often no real feeling behind it. What's worse, though, is that the relentless violence is shoddily shot and inartistic, and even though the remake is only 80 minutes, it crams in as many witless tropes, one-dimensional characters, and cliched lines in as possible. Anyone who had the misfortune of watching this version of Martyrs will tell you that it's not just a bad remake, it's just like one of the worst horror films you can watch. Number 1, Psycho. If you've watched Psycho, then you don't need to watch the 1998 remake because, well, you've already seen it. The director, Gus Van Sant, believed that Alfred Hitchcock's original slasher was so perfect that there was no point to even try and better it. This mentality encouraged him to turn this movie into an almost shot-for-shot remake. Now, this is obviously a terrible idea since every scene now feels totally inorganic. Because the actors are encouraged to replicate the performances of the 1960 version's counterparts, everyone moves stiffly and speaks mechanically. Contrary to popular belief, though, the film isn't a total carbon copy. That's because, unlike the original, the remake opens with a pan and zoom over the city, as Hitchcock wanted to use this shot for his opening, but then scrapped the idea when he couldn't make it look right. However, even this change emphasizes the same point as before. Van Sant didn't alter the opening to better serve his vision. Instead, he just thought, yeah, I'll just do what Hitchcock wanted and couldn't. The 1998 version of Psycho is the worst kind of remake since it is just so bereft of soul. As an experiment, it is an intriguing idea, but as a movie, it's a shameless, perfunctory mess.